The frost arrived early that year, wrapping around the pavement like delicate fingers. In the quiet of a village that had grown indifferent to strays, I came across Lina, barely breathing, curled beside a rusty drain. Her fur was matted, clinging to her like wet leaves, and her eyes drifted in and out of focus. At the time, I couldn't understand why I stopped. I had never rescued an animal before, but her stillness struck me as too final, too peaceful. It hit me that if I turned away, she wouldn't see another day. I crouched down next to her, my boots crunching on the frozen gravel. Her breathing was barely there, and when I reached out, her tiny body didn't flinch. I had seen broken things before, machines, engines that had given up, but this felt different. She wasn't just hurt, she seemed to be surrendering. A few days earlier, Anna had mentioned a kitten, a tiny thing that doesn't move much. At the time, I hadn't paid it much mind. Strays come and go, people talk. But now, seeing her so frail, a tightness welled up in my chest. This wasn't pity, it felt deeper, more significant. I took off my jacket and carefully wrapped her in it. She didn't resist or meow, just blinked slowly, as if unsure she was still part of this world. I hurried back toward my garage. It wasn't a vet's office or a clinic, just a dusty space filled with tools, rags, and a worn heater in the corner. But it was warm, and right then, that was all I could offer. Bogdan spotted me and frowned. "What are you doing with that thing?" I didn't respond. I just laid her on an old towel next to the heater and settled beside her. Her ears twitched weakly. She was still alive. I had no idea if it would be enough or even why I was doing this, but something told me it wouldn't be simple. The garage felt quieter than ever, yet each passing second echoed loudly as I sat with Lina, the fragile bundle wrapped in my jacket. I watched her chest rise and fall in fragile rhythms, a reminder that each breath could be her last. Her paws, once curled like dry petals, were still cold despite the heater's warmth. I dipped a spoon into a mug of lukewarm water and brought it to her lips. When her tongue finally moved, slow and hesitant, a flicker of hope surged through me like electricity in aging wires. The quiet gesture spoke volumes, an unspoken determination to survive, no matter how faint it seemed. Soon after, Anna appeared in the doorway, wearing a coat that was far too thin for the chilly air. Her breath formed little clouds as she knelt beside me, taking in Lina's still body. When she finally spoke, her voice was gentle but fragile. "She's not the only one," she said, her fingers lingering above the kitten's tangled fur. "There are more out there. I've seen them near the train yard at night. She's just the one who didn't keep pace." Her words settled in me like a stone sinking in water. I couldn't save one, and now I learned there were more. I stepped outside to gather my thoughts and noticed a pair of eyes reflecting light from a rooftop nearby. There, beneath the flickering street lamp, stood a black cat, silent and watchful. It didn't seem scared or hopeful, it was simply aware. The name Shadow came to mind effortlessly, as if he had already claimed it for himself. Just then, Bogdan's voice broke the stillness, tinged with skepticism. "You thinking about taking in all the strays now?" He chuckled, but his humor felt flat. I remained silent because, truthfully, I wasn't sure. Inside, Lina let out a faint sound, almost a breath, yet heavier, as if it was a quiet challenge to the odds. I turned to see her shift just a little, inching closer to the heater, as though her body was starting to awaken. In that delicate moment between hopelessness and possibility, I recognized that this was more than just saving a kitten. Something new was beginning. Soft and uncertain, yet strong enough to pull me forward into whatever was ahead. By morning, Lina's breathing had settled into a gentle rhythm, shallow but steady, as if she was learning to trust the warmth surrounding her. The heater hummed quietly, filling the air with the smell of old oil and rust, but it was a soft purring sound that made me sit up in surprise. She remained curled up, yet her chest rose with more intention, as if the part of her that had nearly given up was rethinking its choice. I reached for my phone, my fingers stiff from a night spent by her side, and started searching for supplies, a syringe for feeding her, kitten formula, anything that might help. Options were limited. The village wasn't built for emergencies. It simply endured them until they faded away. Later that afternoon, Anna came back, this time carrying a cardboard box in her arms, her face looking pale and anxious. "I found another," she said, her voice shaking as she set the box down. I leaned closer to see inside, and and it hit me harder than I anticipated. The kitten looked lifeless, smaller than Lina, its breathing so weak, if it was breathing at all. Its fur was soaked, its tiny paws covered in mud, and a foul smell filled the air as if the box had been pulled from somewhere unpleasant. "It was just lying near the old station wall," she murmured, her gaze shifting away from mine. No one else looked twice. In that moment, it became clear this wasn't just a rescue. It was part of a troubling pattern that seemed to escape everyone else's notice. The box sat on the workbench like a question hanging in the air, one we were reluctant to confront. The second kitten, barely alive, didn't make a sound. It lay there with its eyes shut tight, so weak that I kept placing my hand above its chest, hoping to feel any sign of life. Anna hurried to grab a towel, attempting to wipe the filth from the kitten's fur. Her swift, almost frantic movements revealed her effort to stay grounded, to ignore the heavy worry that hovered between us, that this tiny life might already be lost. I remained silent, fearing that voicing our fears would make them real. Just then, Bogdan walked in, his expression one of disbelief, as if he were watching us try to dig a tunnel with our hands. "This is getting out of control," he said, arms crossed. "You're not a vet. You don't have the training. What if they die in here?" He had a point, but something in his tone ignited a stubborn spark within me. I glanced at the two kittens, one warming by the heater, the other barely moving on the bench, and felt a rush of determination fill my chest. It didn't matter that I didn't have all the answers. They were here now, and no one else seemed willing to help. That evening, Shadow returned, sitting silently on the fence, watching us. It felt as if he were assessing our choices, silently judging our worthiness to carry on. It all began with a sharp knock on the garage door, impatient and cutting through the early morning stillness. I opened it to find an older man from the village council. His coat was buttoned up tight, and his expression was stern. He looked past me into the dim space where both kittens were bundled in towels near the heater. "People are saying you're keeping strays," he stated plainly. "You should be careful. Rabies has been reported on the east side. A dog was put down last week. This isn't your responsibility." I nodded and stayed silent, closing the door behind me. Inside, Anna had heard everything, her worried expression clear. "Do you think they'll try to remove them? The council can be strict when they want to be." I didn't respond, not because I didn't care, but because I was unsure of the answer, and admitting that would mean accepting how deep we were already into the situation. Later, Bogdan stopped by with a bottle of livestock antibiotics, trying to be helpful in his own awkward way. "Maybe this will help, or maybe not, but if they get sick, you'll have tough decisions to make." That night, I found myself on the floor with both kittens wrapped in blankets. My hands shook as I attempted to get them to drink the formula Anna had brought from a nearby town. One managed to drink, the other didn't. Outside by the fence, Shadow was no longer alone. Two more cats, thin and quiet, sat next to him, their eyes catching the porch light like glimmering coins underwater. It felt like the train yard was emptying itself right towards us. I leaned against the garage wall, my knees pulled close to my chest as if I were a child hiding from something indescribable. The heater buzzed beside me, releasing weak warmth that did little to ease the chill growing inside. I glanced over at Lina. She was blinking more and even shifting a bit while she slept. Then I looked at the new kitten, still unnamed and unsettlingly motionless. Anna had gone home worn out, and Bogdan was no longer offering advice. A thought slipped in quietly at first. What if I kept Lina? What if she became mine, no longer a stray, not just a temporary rescue? But as soon as I allowed myself to feel that connection, a cold thought hit me. What if I couldn't save the others? What if I focused all my energy on her and failed everyone else? I knew I couldn't take them all in. My house was small. My life felt just as limited. But how could I hand them over to a shelter I didn't believe in, or leave them to fend for themselves again? This situation had grown beyond kittens. It was about who I wanted to be and what I was willing to risk to try. The next morning, before the sun had even risen above the rooftops, Anna burst through the garage door, her scarf pulled tight, her face flushed with urgency. "She's gone," she said, breathless. My mind went blank for a moment as I jumped to my feet, nearly tripping over the blanket I had slept in. Who? I felt my heart race as I asked the question. Anna glanced at the heater and replied, "It's about the second kitten. I got here early to check on her. I thought she was just sleeping, but the towel was cold. The box was empty." We searched everywhere, behind the tool cabinets, under the shelves, even outside in the chilly morning air. But there was no sign of her. No footprints, no blood, just an overwhelming absence. It didn't add up. She couldn't have walked away in her condition, yet the box remained undisturbed, as if she had simply disappeared. I reviewed the footage from the camera I had set up by the back door, but all I found was a jumble of shadows and static. No answers. Later that day, I noticed something odd. The food I had set out for Shadow and the other cats remained untouched. The fence where they usually waited stood empty. There wasn't even a single paw print in the frost. Something had changed. It was as if the stray cats understood something we didn't, something they had witnessed that we had missed. The town felt unnervingly quiet. A stillness hung in the air, and deep down I sensed a warning. We were no longer alone in this. The absence of the kitten left a heavy silence in the garage that none of us could quite fill. I kept the heater running, even though Lina no longer needed it as much. She was starting to move more purposefully, eating with determination, pulling herself toward the folded towel she had chosen as her nest. Her eyes now followed me, not with fear, but with a probing curiosity, as if she was trying to memorize my face and wondering if I would stay. Perhaps I was doing the same. Anna began coming over every day. She stopped calling it the garage and started referring to it as the room. "The others might come back," she'd say, her voice balanced between hope and uncertainty. She brought a litter box, a small scratching post, and some old toys from her niece. It felt risky, the way we were creating a space, like we were putting a name to something that wasn't ready for one. Bogdan had grown quieter. He still visited, sometimes bringing food or simply standing by to observe. But there was a heaviness about him, as if he was anticipating something to go wrong so he could say, "I told you so." Yet I also noticed how he always glanced back at Lina before leaving. Once, I caught him pulling a tiny bottle of eye drops from his coat. "For infections," he mumbled, avoiding my gaze. Shadow returned 2 nights after the kitten's disappearance, but this time he wasn't alone. Beside him stood Tara, an older tabby with tattered ears and eyes that resembled cold glass, standing perfectly still. They didn't come closer. Instead, they watched us from a distance, the flickering light reflecting off their fur like a warning sign. We were all beginning to feel a bond between the humans and the cats. But building trust doesn't guarantee safety. Sometimes it leads to even bigger challenges. I wondered if we were ready for the difficulties ahead. Tension had been creeping in, much like a chill from a cracked window, subtle but impossible to ignore. It didn't fully register until Anna handed me the flyer. It was folded and crumpled from her pocket, but the message was clear. Animal control to begin sweep near train yard. Strays will be collected or euthanized. The date, circled in red, was just 3 days away. Anna placed the flyer on the workbench next to the food bowls, her silence heavy with unspoken concerns. Her eyes showed signs of fatigue. "They're planning a sweep," she murmured. "They know the cats are gathering in this area. They won't care if the cats are sick or frightened. They'll just collect them. It'll be quick and harsh." The silence that followed was dense, filled with thoughts none of us wanted to voice. Bogdan broke the stillness first, arms crossed and jaw clenched. "This is what I warned you about. You can't save them all. You might not even save the one you have." But then there was Lina, looking up from her towel, blinking slowly. Despite her frail appearance, she was gradually healing, having survived a difficult time. There was a shared understanding in her gaze, an unspoken connection among us. Anna wanted to bring her in, to make her part of her home. But doing so meant excluding the others, Tara, Shadow, Pip, who were still lingering in the background, watching without fully trusting us. They had taken time to open up, and we had barely established a fragile bond. The unasked question loomed large. Do we save one, or do we risk everything for the rest? Silence reigned, punctuated only by the weight of our choice. Once made, it couldn't be reversed. That night, we huddled together in the garage, not by design but out of restless minds. The flyer was taped to the wall above the workbench, a constant reminder of the time ticking away. Every rustle of wind felt like the sound of an approaching vehicle. Lina was asleep, curled in her towel with steady breathing, but the atmosphere was anything but peaceful. We were all on edge. Anna sat cross-legged on the floor, arms wrapped around herself, lost in thought. "I can't leave them," she said softly, gazing at the door as if sensing the cats outside were already waiting for our decision. "I can't just pretend they'll be fine if we keep one in my apartment." Bogdan leaned against the tool cabinet, his face difficult to read. "You want to take them all? Where would we put them? Your flat is as small as this garage. Mine's even tighter. We'd be surrounded by litter boxes and vet bills before we know it. What if they get sick or fight with each other? What if they don't survive?" His voice was growing louder, not out of anger, but from fear. "You saw what happened to the second one. We're not rescuers. We're just people who didn't look away." "I'm not trying to save the world," Anna responded, her voice shaky. "I'm just asking if we're the kind of people who turn our backs now." I stayed quiet, my gaze wandering to the window where Shadow stood at the fence, his tail flicking slowly. Behind him, Pip was crouched low, watchful and uneasy. In the distance, Tara sat still like a statue awaiting a verdict. They hadn't come this far, only to be forgotten again, and we hadn't come this far just to stay comfortable. The night before the cleanup loomed over the village like a suspenseful pause. The air was still, the silence thick, as if the world itself sensed a change was coming. None of us could sleep. Anna paced the floor, biting her lip until it bled. Bogdan sat outside on an upturned crate, arms crossed tightly, as though he could physically block the world out. I stayed with Lina, who had started clumsily climbing into my lap when I settled beside her, as if she had already made her choice. But outside, they waited. Tara stood in the distance, her tired body illuminated by the yellow glow of the garage lamp. Pip was near the steps, ears twitching at every noise. Shadow, as always, remained motionless at the fence, now not just watching, but anticipating. They had all come together, not for food, not for warmth, but because somehow they believed in something we hadn't vocalized yet. Inside, the air felt heavy with the unasked question that had lingered among us for days. Were we going to do this? Open the doors? Let them in? Face the mess, the illness, the heartbreak? Could we even attempt to rescue them knowing we might fail? Anna sat beside Lina, looking at me with raw determination in her voice. If we don't try, what was the point of saving her at all? In the quiet that followed, a shift occurred, not in a heartbreaking way, but like a wall giving way when it can no longer bear the load. We moved from a place of fear to one of necessity. The question changed from "should we?" to "we have to." Yet, the decision still lingered, not entirely made, while time continued its relentless march. Dawn arrived abruptly, flooding the world with bright light and urging us to emerge. The flyer remained on the wall, its red-circled date now a reality we had to confront. I stood at the door, gripping the handle, with Lina nestled in the sling across my chest, her little head peeking out with slow curiosity. She was alive, still delicate, still healing, but unmistakably present. The others were out there too, their trust as thin as a whisper, their futures hanging on a choice they couldn't make themselves. Anna stood beside me, her jacket zipped tight, a bag of supplies she had gathered at her side. Bogdan lingered by the heater, hands in pockets and eyes far away. Silence filled the space. I opened the door. Shadow stepped out first, moving slowly and steadily. There was no hesitation. He walked through the threshold as if it were always meant for him. Pip followed closely, low to the ground and unsure, yet he didn't back away. Tara came too, moving cautiously, yet with a quiet determination that suggested she had already made up her mind. They all crossed the threshold. We closed the door behind them, not with fanfare, but with a sense of finality. We didn't know what tomorrow would hold, or if we had made the right choice. In that moment, however, it was enough. They were safe, for now. So many questions remained unanswered, and countless outcomes were beyond our control. But when Lina leaned her head against my chest and purred softly for the first time, I realized we had taken the only step we could live with. And sometimes that has to be sufficient. The garage is lively now. It's filled with the sounds of rustling paws, low purrs, and the occasional hiss from Pip when he startles at his reflection. Tara moves deliberately, claiming whatever spot she prefers. Shadow still observes from the shelves, his watchful gaze constantly assessing. Lina has a fleece-lined basket near the heater, and each time I pass, she lifts one eye to check that I'm still nearby. We didn't resolve anything, not really. The cats are still outside. There's often more pain than we can handle. We've had to turn down requests for help. We've driven to nearby towns just to find affordable medicine. We've had our share of arguments and moments of uncertainty about our decisions. The reality is, we haven't rescued every animal. We've saved some, and sometimes that's where it begins. People often picture rescue as a noble act, but it's really about being patient and facing fears. It's about the uncertainty of whether you'll make it through the night with the one creature that has learned to trust you enough to stop running away. I still work as a mechanic, Anna is pulling double shifts, and Bogdan tries to act indifferent, even though I caught him quietly putting together a shelf for the cats. We're still on this journey and still learning, sometimes stumbling along the way. Yet, when those animals look at us now, there's no fear in their eyes. That might be the first step toward building something meaningful. If this story resonated with you, hold on to that feeling. It shows you're someone who notices the world around you. If this narrative lingered with you, if even a single moment caught your attention or stirred genuine emotion, perhaps this is a place where you belong. These stories are not just about rescues. They're about the connections we forge and the choice to show kindness, even when it's hard or messy. If you believe that even the smallest acts of kindness count, especially when no one is observing, consider subscribing. There are many more stories like Lina's, and countless lives are in need. Sometimes all it takes is for someone to not look away. Feel free to share a comment if this reminded you of someone you helped, or someone you couldn't. And if you think someone else could benefit from hearing this, share it with them. They might just be the person willing to act next time. Because our quiet actions can create ripples far beyond what we see.